It's that time of year, the obligatory best of list. I love this. It gives me a chance to look over all the stuff I watched, good and bad. If I went based off of just what I saw in the theater, this list would comprise crap like The Grudge and Bloodshot. Thankfully, this is my list, so I get to make the rules. So it's going to contain all kinds of stuff. These are in no particular order and may not even be the ones I've given the highest rating to. These are the ones that I had the most fun with or appreciated most this year. And I had to cut a bunch off the list. The only real rule I held myself to for this is that I had to have reviewed the movie for it to be eligible for the list. So without further ado, without apology, here are my top favorite movies for 2020. First up is Underwater. This is not a perfect movie, but it caught me by surprise. I ended up having a lot of fun with this. I saw this in the theater before everything shut down, and it just, the sci-fi aspect of it, and even Kristen Stewart really grabbed me. I had a blast with it. The visuals I thought really worked. The special effects were a lot of fun, and it moved at a fairly quick pace. And I understand that it's not wholly original, but again, just the performances and the storyline, even though a lot of it is predictable as well, I just had a blast with it. Next up is The Trial of the Chicago 7, Aaron Sorkin's movie that is a Netflix original. And this one was a lot of fun, really. I mean, the amount of humor, but also the amount of heart that was in it was moving. I enjoyed all of the characters. I think especially Sacha Baron Cohen. He really killed it for me. He just, his mannerisms, his off the wall, his rebelliousness, but also it made so much sense. Mark Rylance, I think, was also outstanding in this, but one of the understated ones that was just, he killed me, was Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. I mean, his representation of Bobby Seale was just, it was powerful and angering. And Frank Langella, who was playing the judge, kudos for him for being such a despicable person. I mean, it really did. His performance really did make me want to read the court transcripts because I couldn't believe the crap that was coming out of this dude's mouth. If you have now had an opportunity yet to see The Trial of the Chicago 7, it is well worth your time. It is on Netflix. I don't think it's going away anytime soon because it's one of their originals, but it is worth it. Next up is Disney Pixar's Soul with Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey. Whoa, so emotional, so deep. Just, I mean, first off, the animation, like we expect, it's going to be flawless and stunning. And it really was. I mean, it was beautiful to watch. But also just the performances. I mean, I felt it was deep. I felt it was poignant. And it took something, you could take something away from the story. The scene in the barber shop was touching. And also a little bit of gut punch also, especially at the end as Joe is leaving the barber shop. That scene, just that quick little interaction, wow. Open the eyes of the character himself to be able to see, whoa, I haven't talked to anybody else about something about their life. It's all been about me. And just the thought of what is your purpose and what is your role and is it enough? I do think there's enough in this also for young kids to watch. I mean, there are a couple of moments that might be tiny bit scary for them, but they also incorporate like the cat that has mannerisms and facial expressions of human and just kind of slapsticky. And so that will keep them entertained. I don't think the kids are necessarily going to be bored because there is a bunch of stuff that happens, but this is definitely a grown-up movie. The message is grown up. And I think that's the same for a lot of Pixar movies where they really are targeting the parents, that they're giving us as adults something to think about and still giving content that is digestible and entertaining for all the younger viewers. Next up is another movie that surprisingly stars Jamie Foxx. I mean, it came out in limited release in the end of 2019, but it didn't hit everywhere else until 2020. And that's when I was able to see it. That's why it's on the list. It's Just Mercy. It also stars Michael B. Jordan, and it's based on the true story of Brian Stevenson, a civil rights attorney who takes on just wrongfully accused prisoners who are on death row. The story is powerful. The performances are outstanding. I mean, even Brie Larson is she's not unrecognizable, but she does a really good job as well. But I think the standout performance in this is Rob Morgan. He crushed it. And hopefully, I don't know what awards are going to look like this year, but that man needs to be nominated. He was so powerful, and his performance, actually, I liked it better than Jamie Foxx. And Jamie Foxx was outstanding, but Rob Morgan was just, he grabbed hold of my heart and then squeezed it so tight. The good thing about it coming out so early in the year is that now it's available pretty much anywhere. I don't know if it's on demand or if it's on Amazon, but wherever it's at, this is one that you really should find and watch. Now we move on to The Lodge, a kind of psychological thriller horror that stars Riley Keough and Jaden Martell. And this was dark and a little twisted, and I loved the silence and the isolation that came with this. I was not prepared at the very beginning for one of the opening scenes, but it sets the tone for the rest of the movie. Is it predictable? I think a lot of the movie is predictable, but that part didn't bother me, that there is still a lot of just the psychology that is going in this that is twisted, that really just will mess with you, and it messes with the characters. And that's why it was a lot of fun. And I particularly loved the ending of this movie. I mean, it is messed up, and yet it is so fitting, even though you can feel some compassion for certain people. So one of the unexpected movies that I ended up having a blast with this year was The Invisible Man with Elizabeth Moss. I wanted to go in having fun with it, but didn't realize how much fun I was actually going to have. I mean, the special effects were spectacular in this, but the story itself also grabbed me. I mean, yes, it is a retelling of the classic horror, but they did it really well. Aldous Hodge and Oliver Jackson Cohen as supporting roles in this are wonderful also. I mean, just the whole group worked really well. Like in The Lodge, I like some of the psychology that goes into The Invisible Man. I love how it messes with our character's mind, where it is just playing tricks, which then plays tricks on us. And so us as an audience, we're staring with our main character to see, what are they staring at? Did they see something? Do they think they see something? They think they see something. Do I see something? And, oh, did that move? And then there's nothing there. Or was there something there? I love that. It put me into Elizabeth Moss's place, and it forced me to watch, and it forced me to focus on things. And I would strain so hard that I could have sworn I saw something. But did I? So The Invisible Man definitely was one that was a surprise this year, but one that I'm absolutely glad I watched. Next up is a movie that was supposed to come out in 2019 and then got moved around a bunch and finally came out in 2020. And I think it's one of the last movies I actually saw in the theater. It's The Hunt. This is also one of those that is not perfect by any means. I mean, I love some of the social commentary that is in there. I think at some point it was maybe trying a little too hard to weigh one side versus the other, at least in political landscapes. But it poked fun at a lot of different people and a lot of different ideals. And so that I appreciated. Betty Gilpin is really good in this, but I think probably the highlight of the entire thing comes at the very end of the movie, where Betty Gilpin and Hilary Swank have a discussion. And the discussion that goes on, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, well, you're in for a treat. It's real. And I loved that it had that realism to it, that they had to sit down and they had to take a moment and they had to mutter some things under their breath. And that realism rang true, that I could see that actually happening versus some other discussions that would happen maybe in other movies where it wouldn't faze anybody. But it is a lot of fun. I know that was totally vague, and well, hey, it is what it is. The story, I think, is kind of predictable also. I mean, a lot of the movies on this list are somewhat predictable, but it's still a lot of fun. I mean, it is a lot of action. There's a lot of blood. It catches me off guard a lot of the time. Certain things that I was not prepared for that just happened. Boom, there they go. And I was like, whoa, oh, okay, we're doing that. All right, so this is kind of the tone of the movie. And it almost from the very get-go, it sets the tone. And then it carries it through pretty well throughout the entire thing. The Vast of Night, it is an Amazon Prime original movie that takes place in the 50s, and it's a sci-fi type of drama. And this is another one of those that I didn't know anything of what I was getting myself into. I just sat down and decided to watch it. I'm so glad I did. It is quieter. It is a little slower. It's filled with all kinds of Easter eggs from other sci-fi movies and shows and just the sci-fi genre. It's also filled with some really long takes. And I love that. I love how the camera on some of them will follow a scene and just go, and it's one take, one long continuous take. And other times the camera focuses on a person who may not even be delivering dialogue, but dialogue is occurring. And so we just get to sit there and be sucked in to the scene. This is more of an indie film. I don't think it was made on a massive budget, but yet it kills it. The beginning of this movie, I wasn't exactly sure if I was going to stick with it though. The first, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes of it were a little bit rough. I'm glad though that I did stick it out. So if you haven't seen this and you start watching it and you're like, what am I watching? Why am I watching this? It's not really intriguing. It's not engaging. It gets there. And you have to follow these characters at the beginning, and you just kind of puts you in the mindset of what's going on, and then we dive into the story. The story elements of somebody may have seen something. You have a telephone operator and a radio DJ, and them start to try and connect people together and just build the story from there. It is a lot of fun, and it's certainly something that I didn't see coming, and I'm glad that I did get the chance to watch. Okay, only a few more movies left on my top list of 2020. And this one up is Hamilton. Now you're like, well, Chris, this is first off a Broadway play, and then it was filmed, I don't know, in like 2016. Well, yeah, guess what? I didn't get to see it until it hit Disney Plus in 2020. And my list, my rules, but this is phenomenal. It is so much fun. And the rapid fire lyrics are outstanding. Now, the first time I watched this, I was drawn into it. I was sucked into it, but I also didn't know all the lyrics. And so I was going along with it, and seeing the visual of it really helped in just telling the story of Alexander Hamilton and the beginning really of our nation. And it's a lot of fun. But now, I mean, I have been playing the soundtrack on Spotify, looped, just going over it. I've watched Hamilton on Disney Plus over and over again because I'm so drawn into all of the characters. Leslie Odom Jr. as Aaron Burr, that man has such a spectacular voice. Huh. Now, most of the actors do have phenomenal voices, but his is like the standout. And even though he is the villain kind of in this show, that he's still somebody that I couldn't not look at and I was drawn to him, drawn to the performance. One of the things that I absolutely loved about seeing Hamilton on the screen is that they can get up close, that we can then see all of the emotion in the eyes, that they can whisper a line and we hear it, that it doesn't have to be belted out like if we were on the stage. Now, don't get me wrong, I love stage plays and I love seeing things on the stage as a production because I think plays are amazing and it just has a certain level of energy that you can't capture in other things. But luckily they were able to capture it with this because they filmed a real performance. And one of the standouts in Hamilton is Jonathan Groff as King George. And they were gracious. The actor that was actually playing King George was gracious enough to step aside for this production night, for this recording, so that Jonathan Groff could reprise his role for it. And he kills it too. That laugh that he has was infectious. And it made me giggle when I heard him. But the whole production is so worth watching, and it's almost worth getting Disney Plus just for that. I'm not sure if they've released it on Blu-ray or 4K that you can buy, but Hamilton is probably one that's worth buying. So second to last is a movie on my list that I literally just reviewed the other day. And like I said, the only movies that I'm including in this list are ones that I have reviewed. And so I reviewed it and I put out my review a little before I really wanted to, because I wanted it to make the list, and it is One Night in Miami. This is Regina King's directorial debut, at least for a feature-length film, and it is a real night that happened, but a fictional take on it, and it's based off a play. So you have Hamilton and now One Night in Miami, and we have 4 characters. We have Jim Brown, Cassius Clay, Sam Cooke, and Malcolm X all in a hotel room having discourse and having a conversation, and their performance is so powerful. The storytelling is wonderful. It's awesome to look at. And one of the things that I absolutely love is the screenplay for this movie is written by the playwright. So it is sticking to the source material. So while some things might be changed a little bit for the screen versus for the stage, the essence of it and the dialogue is able to be maintained. And so we keep the heart of what the story is. And it is outstanding. It was in limited release in theaters on Christmas Day, and it's coming to Amazon Prime on January 15th. This is one that you need to put on your watch list because it is spectacular. Kingsley Ben-Adir, who plays Malcolm X, is phenomenal. I mean, I absolutely loved him. I was so drawn to his performance. And that's not a slight at all to all of the other characters. Oh, also, like in Hamilton, Leslie Odom Jr., he plays Sam Cooke. So when Sam Cooke, the character, sings in this, it's really Leslie Odom Jr. singing. Oh, so good. Make sure you check out One Night in Miami. Okay, finally on my list is another Amazon Prime original. I actually got to check it out at a film festival earlier this year, but it is Sound of Metal. Riz Ahmed plays a drummer, a metal drummer who is losing his hearing, and he's also an addict, and so he has to learn how to be a deaf person. And the struggle that he goes through, just all of that journey that he goes on, spectacular. His performance is award-worthy, but then we also have a supporting actor who is Paul Raci, and he is actually a child of deaf adults. So he lived in this world. He knew and knows what it is like to be around deaf people, to function in that. And so it makes his performance perfect. I mean, he is just, he delivers some lines that are gut punch lines in this also, that are heartbreaking, and yet they need to be said. And I love that when he delivers them, there is quavering in his voice, that his breath is shaking, that, I mean, it's almost as if he's really telling a real person this. And when he's delivering this news, and you see how devastating it is to him to have to say these words, and yet he knows that he must. Sound of Metal is out now, and it is one of those that when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh yes, I must see this. And when I saw it, I was just floored. 2020 has been quite the ride. Thank you so much for your support of me and my channel. I am having a blast and cannot wait to see what's in store for 2021. So what movies are on your top list for 2020? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris, from my couch to yours. I hope you have a happy and healthy new year. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.